fresh meat.
Blackest eyes, the devil's eyes.
The choose-your-own-adventure aspect of the Halloween franchise has made it one of the most original and complex franchises in horror. While they were originally trying to keep the same continuity going forward, with the exception of Halloween 3, it eventually got too convoluted and just plain crazy to keep track of. What started as an escaped mental patient killing hapless babysitters had turned into a story about pagan cults, incest, and weird psychic connections that fluctuated from sequel to sequel. After 20 years, the team behind the films decided they needed a fresh slate, a way to reboot the franchise without losing all the groundwork that they had already laid. How do you do it? Can you ask the audience to ignore the previous movies in a series? While sometimes filmmakers had just ignored other movies in a franchise to create their own vision, this was the company that controlled the movies, asking fans to ignore 4 films and only accept the films going forward.
It had never been done before.
The only linchpin to this whole scenario would be a returning final girl and a return to the stalk and slash roots of Michael Myers. For this to work, the storyline from Halloween 4 through 6 had to be erased from existence. No more Jamie Lloyd, no more Cult of Thorn, and no more Michael fathering a kid with his niece. While it's sad to lose some of it, other things are better left to the dustbin of time, rather than revisited. With this video series, we break down the different paths Halloween went down while trying to figure out its own mythology. Here we continue with the H20 timeline, which sweeps away the Jamie Lloyd storyline along with the non-connected Halloween 3. As we've mentioned before, it's the simplest of plots that John Carpenter was able to turn into one of the most suspenseful movies committed to film.
The blackest eyes, the devil's eyes.
An escaped mental patient who killed his sister when he was a young boy runs into a couple of young high school girls and becomes obsessed with one of them. He spends the rest of the night killing them off one by one until his doctor finally is able to stop him with 6 shots.
Couldn't have shot him 6 times.
You think I'm lying, Sheriff?
I think you missed him.
Only for him to escape and kill again. The biggest thing Halloween 2 adds, or detracts depending on your point of view, to the Halloween mythos is that while Loomis is traveling around Haddonfield to find Michael's whereabouts, he stumbles onto the fact that Laurie Strode is actually Michael's baby sister who had been adopted out after his tragic slaying of Judith. Carpenter himself has said this was a horrible mistake. He felt he needed a hook to explain why Michael would be so obsessed with Laurie. This one story point has impacted the entire franchise and backed it into a corner. The 20th anniversary of the franchise was approaching, and Dimension Films were working on another film. Scripts were being written and ideas thrown around. Little did they know their biggest Halloween casting was about to fall into their lap. While Jamie Lee Curtis left the horror genre to pursue other acting opportunities, she never forgot what her first big break was. With the big anniversary coming up, she had decided a return to the franchise that made her famous would be a fun treat for the fans and a full circle moment for herself.
And I thought, I'm still in the movie business, I can still get a job. Wouldn't it be interesting if we went back and made a 20th anniversary movie?
But she didn't want to return alone. She was able to get a meeting with Dimension between herself, John Carpenter, and Deborah Hill. While Dimension was enthusiastic about bringing the team back together for another Halloween, John Carpenter wasn't. He felt he was owed some back royalties from earlier films and hoped to rectify that with this meeting. His asking price to direct was alleged to be $10 million. Dimension balked at the amount, so Carpenter decided to leave the project. With Carpenter out, so was Deborah Hill. While she was sad that the group wasn't coming back together, Lee decided to stay on for a new film. Luckily for her, right after signing on, Scream hit the big screen and reinvigorated interest. Since Scream had been such a big hit and showed a lot of love for the Halloween franchise, they turned to the hottest screenwriter in Hollywood at the moment, Kevin Williamson. He was hesitant to take the job as he was in the middle of production on Dawson's Creek in North Carolina. Luck would have it that Jamie Lee Curtis was also in North Carolina working on a project, so the two would meet up for lunch and discuss ideas for the new film. After some back and forth, Williamson would turn in a treatment for the new film that the company could go off of. The script was written and Steve Miner was brought in to direct the film. All the pieces fell into place to get the film out in time for the 20th anniversary. In the new film, we find that Dr. Loomis had recently passed away and his nurse Marion, played by Nancy Stevens reprising her role from the original film, had been taking care of his affairs. She returns home one night to find her door ajar. When she goes inside, she finds her house has been vandalized and Dr. Loomis's files have been scattered everywhere. Michael is also waiting for her. It turns out Laurie Strode has been living under the assumed name Carrie Tate. Her son John also lives with her on the school grounds. She's been divorced and is now an alcoholic as she tries to forget her past. With the 20th anniversary of the death of her friends approaching, she begins to worry that Michael could find her. She seems to have reason to worry as Michael indeed does show up looking for his sister and nephew. He ends up bringing death to the school, which is thankfully almost empty as it's fall break. Laurie has to face Michael one more time as they finally reconcile their family connection. The film had a mildly troubled production. The rights owner Mustafa Akkad had a stern set of rules about the character Michael Myers. He loved the character and more importantly, he loved the money the character made him. While the thought had been for a few sequels now to fully kill off the character, he always said no. Every ending of a sequel had to have an escape clause already set up for Michael Myers to return. In this film, they again brought up the idea of finally killing Michael, seeing as Jamie Lee Curtis was back, and it would be a fitting end for the villain. Akkad would not budge on this stance. It was finally agreed that they would give the illusion that they were killing off the character by decapitating him, but in the next film would have an easy explanation as how he was still alive. Akkad would only agree to this if they filmed this reasoning while they were shooting the end of the movie so that they would already have it on film, and also if Jamie Lee Curtis would at least cameo in the next film to help explain this plot twist. She reluctantly agreed, but it was settled. Then they had issues finding the right mask for the film. Initially, the mask had been agreed upon by all parties, but by the time the film ended, 4 different masks were used throughout the film. John Carl Buechler created one, K&B Effects created one, Stan Winston created one, and a digital mask was used for one scene in the film.
What the fuck is this?
These looks all mixed together to have the mask look very inconsistent throughout the film. The Buechler mask was used in the opening scenes of the film, while the K&B mask was originally used in the film but was changed during reshoots. It can still be seen in some of the shots. The Stan Winston mask was used throughout most of the film, including some reshoots of scenes that previously had the K&B mask. The weird thing about the film is that while it was stated by the studio and filmmakers that it ignores Halloween 3 and 6, it does actually take a few things into account. In Halloween 4, we learn that Laurie died in a car accident and left behind a young daughter. Here in this film, she admits to her new boyfriend that she faked her death in a car accident. If looked at as a connection to part 4, it would make her an awful mother for leaving behind a daughter to deal with Michael Myers while she went off to have a new family and a new life. As we'll see, she apparently has no problem leaving her children behind for new children in later entries as well. At the time, H20 would go on to be a big hit. The reunion of Laurie Strode and Michael Myers had brought out fans to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the franchise. Michael had once again stalked and slashed teenagers and faced off with his sister yet again. He had been beheaded, and that left fans with their jaws on the ground. Now what? A few ideas were thrown around, but eventually it was decided to go with the idea from writer Larry Brand. His idea saw a mixture of reality TV and a pinch of the old War of the Worlds radio show. Here, an online mogul would set up a scenario of having teenagers spend the night in the Michael Myers house only to make the audience think that the Shape had in fact returned to kill them off one by one. It would be fake, of course, until the actual Michael Myers did return, and he wasn't very happy that all these teens were in his house. At the beginning of the film, we learn the sad truth that Laurie didn't kill Michael Myers. He had grabbed an ambulance driver and switched places with him. While Michael disappeared into the woods, the van carrying the driver is stolen by Laurie. After it crashes, she decapitates whom she thinks is a pinned Michael. Afterwards, she finds out that instead she has killed the ambulance driver who had his throat crushed to prevent him from talking while wearing the classic Michael Myers mask and overalls. This sends her into a mental breakdown. She ends up in an asylum where she has become nonverbal, just like her brother. Michael finally tracks her down and finally end their feud once and for all. He breaks into the asylum but finds out she's been waiting for him. They have a chase up to the roof where Laurie thinks she's gotten the better of him, but after the last traumatic turn, she has to be sure it's actually Michael. As she reaches for his mask, he grabs her and stabs her in the stomach. Before she falls to her death, she kisses him, and with Laurie dispatched, Michael Myers decides to return home. Little does he know that Dangertainment has moved into his house and they're setting up an online event where a group of kids will spend the night in Myers' house and viewers can watch along with head-worn cameras and different rooms set up with different angles. When the event starts, viewers think they see Michael Myers appear, but it's only a stunt. Feeling relief, they watch with glee until the real Michael shows up and the real killing starts. One of the biggest things people hate about this movie is that the head of Dangertainment is Freddy, played by rapper Busta Rhymes. When asked about this, Mustafa Akkad places the blame right at his teenage son's feet. He says his son said Busta was a super cool guy and that kids loved him, so he was happy to cast him in his movie. Whether you like him or hate him, it's guaranteed that no one expected a kung fu fight between Busta Rhymes and Michael Myers to be in the next Halloween sequel. With Laurie Strode's story finished, or for now at least, the rest of the movies just sort of staggers around without much to do. While the idea of presenting a Halloween movie in a pseudo found footage style could be an attractive thought, it played better on paper than in practice. The character of Michael Myers does better in a routine suburban setting. He hides in the shadows and could walk out of a corner of a room at any time to dispatch the latest person who has wandered into his eye line. Here, with the cameras covering every room of the house, it takes a lot of the suspense out of it and loses things that originally made Michael Myers scary. None of the characters come off as likable. While Michael had fallen into the role previously of being the villain that people rooted for to kill obnoxious teens, there usually was at least one character that the viewers came to care about. Here we get very little to work with as far as backstory or relationships between the characters. While most have signed on to this project to hopefully become famous, without a leading character like Laurie Strode to anchor the series, we're left wandering aimlessly through the rest of the movie, not really caring who lives or dies. Michael's big motivation in this film seems to be that he wants the teens out of his house. Anyone over 25 can relate. Seems like a sad ending for the series, as it did go on to underperform. The end of Michael Myers seemed to be at the hands of Busta Rhymes after getting set on fire. While we do get our obligatory shot of Michael opening his eyes on the morgue table, this would mark the end of the series before Rob Zombie would come in to reimagine the film series. While the killer was stalking his way into a second decade, all it took to bring him down was in fact a Busta. Sad. Thank you for watching our show, and if you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Horror Videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content to turn on the notification bell and receive notifications for all our latest videos. We're an independent company, and we appreciate all your support.